So thank you for having us. SaaStock, really excited to be here and talk about the future of online training. I think whenever anyone kind of brings up the future, the things that come to mind are hoverboards and floating cars and flying cars. But for us at CoAssemble and in the space of knowledge sharing online, the future of online training really comes down to simplicity and breaking down the barriers of knowledge sharing across different platforms, different areas, and we're really excited, I guess, to keep tracking along the vision of ensuring transferability and shareability of knowledge across businesses, team members, everywhere that we can see knowledge being able to be shared. So when we think about the future of online training, it really does come down to simplicity of shareability. And today we're just going to walk through a little bit about that as we move through. So I'm Macpherson. I was a teacher for 6 years in higher education. I'm super passionate about online training and making a difference in people's lives every single day, but ensuring we do so in a really engaging, rich fashion. There's a lot to be said about online training. If you think about online training, you probably often think, it's quite laborious and boring and not that exciting. And internally, if you've done courses in the past, you might be thinking, well, I've never really seen that great of an experience. But I think the future of online training is an exciting one, and it's really about making sure that each experience can be really contextually relevant to the person that's actually learning it, and making sure that it can be kind of passed through all of the different tools that businesses are using today. And I think the most exciting things that we'll talk about today is how can online training actually transform a business. And we're seeing, obviously, at the moment, a very special time in the history of the world, but, a lot of knowledge sharing is necessary at the moment to really shift businesses forward, especially in a remote environment. And so, obviously, online training or online education, or what we call knowledge sharing, can play a massive part of that. I'm a recent dad of 7 weeks. My beautiful daughter coming along 7 weeks ago. So that knowledge and everything about bringing up knowledge inside of a person and also an employee has always been something that I'm super passionate about. So excited about that journey for me as well. I'm also the CEO at CoAssemble. I'm lucky enough to work with a super talented team who are designing the next and innovative ways to engage people online in knowledge, learning, training, anything that really is storytelling and experimental learning at any time. There's really 3 key focuses, and I think when we talk about the future of online training, a lot of people go to VR and AR and extreme examples of online experiences. But what we really want to focus on is, a lot of the time, there is often a focus for what is the content we're going to train someone in, or what is the problem we're trying to solve, and what is the best presentation we've got, or where is the best Google Doc that I've got, and how can I share that as quickly as possible to get this knowledge across. But at CoAssemble, and I think in the industry as a whole, we've started to really focus on the learner or the audience, the person that's actually going to consume this knowledge. And we've seen that happen in marketing. We've seen that happen in websites, where there really is a focus on this user experience. And I think it was a little bit late into the online training space, but I know that we're really focused on making sure that the end result, the person that actually is consuming this knowledge, really has a really unique experience, not something that is outdated, not something that feels like it wasn't meant for them, and certainly in a place where they feel comfortable. So I want to kind of talk very quickly about the 3 key focus areas for shifting knowledge inside businesses of today, where we see that you can really make a big difference. Number 1 is content, and there's a big difference between rich experimental content that can kind of really engage someone in a learning process and pass down knowledge, compared to just sharing what we call a document or a static piece of information, which essentially is a piece of information sharing. And so we like to really just look at those 2 differences and ensure that if we're really thinking about passing down knowledge and also testing that knowledge and also seeing if that knowledge is going to make an impact in that person's role or their everyday, we want to make sure that that content actually fits perfectly with what that user case is. The second component for us is all about audience. There's often this preconception that we need to build a brand new environment for learning. And I think what's really interesting there is that often fails because the best environments for learning already exist in your organizations. And I think, these days with Slack and Microsoft Teams, there's so many communities, internet spaces where chat and storytelling is happening, and that's natural learning. And that's really exciting if we can tap into that and then add a visceral, rich experience over the top of that learning. What we can do is really combine that audience buzz and get social learning happening, referral learning, making sure that people actually want to move that story on or move that knowledge on in their own career and into other people's careers. And then the third one is context. There's nothing worse than kind of doing a course or some sort of educational onboarding experience. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, but if it's not contextually relevant, you're going to quickly switch off. And we've found that essentially micro learning, the idea around moving learning really, really quickly is starting to deal with some of that contextual relevance problem. You can imagine if I'm a salesperson and I spend all day in a CRM, the last thing I want to do is move over to an LMS or a learning management system that is outside of my focus, my audience. And also I don't want to do courses essentially or product, tutorials that aren't relevant to my daily job. So if you combine these three focuses and think about where online training is going in the future, it feels like to us that there are so many platforms out there, there are so many audiences existing in workplaces already, and there is so much chat. There's so many conversations, notifications, emails, there's information flying around everywhere. And what we really find is it's often the last thing that a business thinks about is, how do I actually transform my knowledge in my business? Especially me as a startup 3 years ago, starting the company, we've grown from 3 people to 36 people. How do we transfer that original tribal knowledge that was so focused in our business out to now a growing audience? And I think even more so, we've now started to see customers come on board in the learning process. Even our market starting to really focus in on how online training can affect them. So for us, 3 key focus areas, bring them together. We kind of focus on shareable, quick nuggets of concepts that can easily fly through these platforms. So for us, it's about, okay, if, for example, Slack is your best audience in the business, that's where most of the conversations happen, it's where most of the knowledge sharing is taking place. How do we actually maintain our learning or put it in a place that says, okay, let's make sure that it's there, right in context. When someone logs into Slack, and let's say, for example, they're in a channel that's product tours, and the latest product updates just happened, and we want to make sure our team is fully versed, fully aware of that knowledge, and they need to partake and pass that on to our customers, or they need to put it into the next marketing sprint. How do we make sure that knowledge is transferred? If we invite that person out of that environment and take them somewhere else to learn that learning, all of a sudden what we've done is a complete disconnect. That person now has moved environment. They need to understand the new environment to take place. What we want to do is actually say, okay, how do we get that course material, even if it's very short and sharp, how do we make sure that it's basically inside the audience that best fits? And how do we take advantage of that social element of that audience? And I think by doing that, we start to think about the content that we start to share. It becomes more multimedia. It becomes a bit more immersive. It becomes a bit more discussion-based rather than the traditional model where it was all information flow. If you think about PowerPoint, PowerPoint's been around for years, and so many people, even especially as now COVID has hit the world, are sharing PowerPoints via email. They're sharing PowerPoints on the internet. And PowerPoint's one of the funniest tools for sharing of knowledge because it was designed to have a voice behind it. So what we need to think about it when we think about rich content and actually passing on tribal knowledge in our businesses down into our employees, we need to think about that rich immersive experience. How do we add the voice into an online experience and then make that available at the best place for that person so they can actually access that material? And then I think what that does is allow contextual relevance, right? So if place where I do my daily, I'm in the flow of work, and I find a really small mini course to help me out in my daily job, what I feel like is I would take that on. I would take that knowledge. And if I knew that John or Paul or Susie around the corner might be interested in that as well, what we start to see is referral. We start to see social learning. We can start really shifting that knowledge around the business. So I think what's really key here is if we can combine these three elements, it's a super powerful and rich experience for anyone that's basically going to online learning. So just to summarize, I think for us, what does the future look like for online training? For us, it's about knowledge sharing, and how do we make that so simplistic and shareable? And so it's as easy as sharing via URL, or sharing via an embed code, or sharing literally a really rich piece of content inside another platform that is contextually relevant to that learner. But we're doing it in a way that we've got a problem on Monday, we're designing it on Monday, and we're shipping it on Monday, compared to the traditional HR role, which was let's sit down and design a course for 6 weeks, roll it out, and the problem already has gone away. I really hope you've enjoyed this insightful talk. Hopefully, if you've got any questions, please hit me up at CoAssemble. Thank you.